Stories. Stories are important. The story in my mind about who I am, where I came from, what I'm doing now and where I might go next, fundamentally shapes the way I look at the world. And I'm pretty sure that the stories in your mind also shape the way you look at the world. Stories are like the lenses through which we understand the reality around us. And they are very important in the process of us defining our identity, our values, and our relationships today. But they were also important for people who came before us. One of my lectures here at Newbold keeps reminding us that if you came to an ancient Jew and you asked him a very important question, like, for example, what's the meaning of life? He would reply by saying, let me tell you a story. That may be the reason why some theologians in the late 20th and early 21st century have been focusing so much on biblical narratives. And within that group, there is a group of theologians who have tried to reconstruct the stories that hide behind even non-narrative texts such as the epistles of Paul or Peter or John. The idea is that the biblical authors also looked at the world through the lenses of a particular story. And just like when we read a good book or we see a good movie and then we discuss it with our friends, all they were doing were just to analyze and to reconstruct that story. The first scholar to do this was a guy named Richard Hayes in the end of the 1980s. But more recently, another scholar named Kenneth Schenck tried to apply the same method to the book of Hebrews. So, what is the story that we can perceive in the book of Hebrews? Well, it's a story about this perfect and immortal God who wants to allow imperfect and mortal humans to have a complete access to himself. Because of that, he establishes a first covenant with Abraham. And that covenant involves a number of what theologians call cultic elements. Elements such as a priesthood, a sanctuary, and a law. Unfortunately, however, those elements are unable to completely establish access to God. Because this God wants to be in a deep relationship with humans so much, he keeps trying over and over again. And he sends his Son, Jesus Christ. It is because of him that we are finally able to walk through this completely unobstructed pathway to God. When I hear that story, it makes me think about the stories in our minds. What is the story in our minds about God? Is it like Hebrews' God who wants to allow access to himself? Or is it a story about this very distant God who we need to appease in order to approach him? Likewise, what is the story in our minds about ourselves? Do we see ourselves as mere mortals with no value whatsoever to God? Or do we see ourselves as so valuable that he kept trying over and over again to connect with us? In Hebrews chapter 10, verses 19 and 22, we read, "So friends, we can now, without hesitation, walk right up to God into the holy place. So let's do it, full of belief, confident that we are presentable inside and out." That's the story I want to have in my mind. And I would like to challenge you to keep that story in your mind as well.